Namaste, everyone, and welcome to Ramayana Odyssey, where we explore the timeless story of the Ramayana and reflect on its meanings in our lives today. So, in our previous story, we found a profound dialogue between Valmiki and Narada, where Narada revealed that Rama is not just a great king, but rather the embodiment of Dharma itself. What unfolds next becomes a very big turning point. And this isn't just in Valmiki's journey, but rather in the birth of something timeless. After Narada departs, Valmiki walks to the banks of the Tamasa River with his disciple Bharadvaja. And in that calm setting, he observes a pair of birds moving together in harmony. But suddenly, without warning, a hunter's arrow strikes one of them, and the other is left in visible grief. Moved by deep compression, Valmiki spontaneously utters these words, but they weren't ordinary words. They came with structure, rhythm, and balance, turning into the first shloka. But immediately after he says them, he takes a minute and pauses. He realizes that the words he spoke carried the force of an actual curse. And instead of justifying it, he turns inward and asks, why did I respond this way? Was this aligned with who I am? And he sits with this question in a while for quiet inquiry. And to explore this powerful and thought-provoking moment, I'm joined today by all of the co-authors of Ramayana Odyssey. Our guide Vivek Ji, my uncle Dr. Vikrant Singh Tomar, and my dad Rajesh Rabindranath. We work together as a team in creating content for Ramayana Odyssey. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Daksha, for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me start with a question for all of you. So I'm going to ask this to Vivek Ji first, and then Vikrant uncle, and then Acha last. So after hearing the story, what was the thing that stood out most to you? The actual event itself, or what it tells us about Valmiki?
Yeah. First of all, Rajeshi should be answering first, then Vikranti, then me, but I'll follow what you've shared, Daksha. For me, what has stood out the most is the actual incident. Because the incident really shows the nature of creation, the nature of experiences. That built into creation, built into experiences is separation, is conflict. And I feel with Rishi Valmiki Ji, this epiphany of oneness was so moving for him. And then it's almost like he opened his eyes and he saw this negativity and it startled him. But it shouldn't be startling because this is the nature of creation. This is the nature of living. And every one of us knows this, but it somehow gets overlooked. We ignore it. So it's the incident that is very telling in directing Rishi Valmiki Ji and all of us to really pay attention to our own creation, our own experiences. That's from my...
Thank you, Vivek Ji, rightly mentioned. And Daksha, to your question, what does it tell about Valmiki Ji? I will add, what does it reveals about life itself? And this is what, as Vivek Ji said, is the nature of life. All looks perfectly okay, and suddenly everything shatters. Sudden jerk and peace is gone. Peace outside is temporary, is the lesson. It will remain temporary. And the second is, what does it reveal about Valmiki? See, when he witnesses suffering, as in psychology, mirror neurons starts and he feels compassion, emotions, and some automatic thoughts appears. They came in form of words. Words were structured and rhythmic, as you said. But the important thing here is, when these automatic thoughts comes out of emotions, they are not as that automatic, they comes from deep sanskaras. Why whatever he said was so much rhymic, as Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita, sudden expression of past life sanskaras or the learnings, if not past life, your own learnings, even if in that moment of compassion, whatever came out of his mouth was rhythmic. So Vedana, if processed well, becomes Veda. Shoka, if processed well, becomes Shloka. And Dukkha, if processed well, becomes Daru. Daru means a medicine. healing, and dukkha means suffering. So the same event may lead to post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic growth depending on your sanskaras and your processing abilities. So it's my first reflections.
Great observations. It shows who Maharshi Valmiki Ji is. Usually people think that a self-realized master is free from emotions. Here he was able to relate to that emotions and pain quickly. And obviously something came out of him without him planning or anything like that. But immediately he recognized, what did I do? So that humanity, even for a learned person, that humanity is there. And that is what revealed.
I think that this aspect of the story was very telling for everyone as well, as this was his first reaction. And I think this is something that we could all learn from even today. So I found it very helpful in that sense. Vivekji, what really stood out to me here in this story is that Maharshi Valmiki's pain wasn't personal. And he felt the suffering of another being so deeply he uttered those words. So, how do we begin to understand this kind of compassion?
That's a fine question, and I very much like what Rajesh and Vikrant shared. It's provided me so much to reflect on. And so I'll tell you a story that perhaps will help answer this question. When I was living in an ashram as a brahmachari, one of the assignments we were given was to write down in paper an analysis of Acharya Shankara's Moha Mudgara, or Bhajagovindam. Okay, whether it was the arrangement of the verses or the thought flow from 1 to whatever number. And one of my batchmates, he very thoughtfully wrote an appreciation letter to the elderly person who was chanting Sanskrit grammar rules. It was an appreciation letter to him. Because of him, Acharya Shankara actually gave the advice that is Moha Mudgara. Correct?
Yeah.
And if we extrapolate this even more to the Bhagavad Gita, it's because of Prince Arjuna's apparent fear that Sri Krishna offered the Bhagavad Gita for Prince Arjuna and all of us. So now pulling this back even further to Rishi Valmiki Ji, when he saw, as I've described earlier, this conflict and this separation, his was a feeling of oneness. And so though it wasn't his personal pain, as you mentioned, but at this point, he's identified with all birds, all hunters, all beings. And in this identification, he's not necessarily thinking about himself or that bird or that hunter, but he's thinking of all beings. What is the methodology by which there can be less conflict in creation, less separation amongst beings? And so all of this, from my narrative, is ordained. This is all the divine's will, the divine's leela, as a scenario for which Rishi Valmiki Ji is an instrument to teach me, and maybe you, on how we can convert values into virtues the way Sri Rama lived. He lived by virtues. Can we do the same? So this was not an emotional fit. This was not a revelation. This is all part of the custom-designed plan to spread the message of converting values into virtues, and virtuousness is oneness. I hope those weren't too many big words and that came across clearly.
Yes, that was very clear. I found it particularly interesting because I didn't see, initially at least, Valmiki's story as like a lila specifically. So I'm very glad you mentioned that point. It was a very interesting perspective to look at this whole story from. Okay, so Vikrananko, this moment is so sudden and unexpected. So what does it tell us about how life presents situations that test us without any warning in advance?
Thank you, Daksha. As I mentioned earlier, that Everything looks perfect, but suddenly everything shatters. And this is how life unfolds. It's very unpredictable. In school, teachers teach us first and then take the test. Life takes the test first and then teaches us. That's why learnings are lasting. And that's why the purpose of life is to learn the lesson and forget the people. But people tend to remember the people and forget the lesson. But Valmiki is a sage. He knows that, yes, in the transactional reality, we are born by chance, we die by chance, but in between, life is a choice. Situations in Sanatana is called prarabdha. They come suddenly. But what we have in our hand is our response, that is called purushartha. And that's why Earth should be taken as a university. Life is a course we take there. Experiences are the chapters, and the defining moments are such tests and exams. And whole Ramayana is happening in our life itself. And how to live during that is being demonstrated by Rama himself. And that's why Ramayana. See, Balkanda talks about innocence, birth, childhood, playing. It's all about it. Parents, education, assignments, marriage. Ayodhya Kanda is about responsibility, challenges, relationship dynamics, professional learnings. Aranya Kanda is about understanding, deep understanding of life, ups and downs, deception, fear, tears, external extreme challenges. Kishkinda Kanda, improvement, ability improvement, networking. Sundar Kanda, flow, highest productivity. Lanka Kand, ruling, crossing limitations, and Uttarkand, conclusion of life. So yes, this is how it happens within us. And this teaches a lot about life, Ramayana as a scripture itself.
I'm really glad you explained it this way, Vikrant uncle, because a lot of people, I've noticed, especially today, see something bad and then immediately think, why me? But the truth is, everything comes as a lesson to learn from, and it's the opportunity to grow. So I'm very happy you brought it up like that, Vikrant uncle. Acha, what I found very interesting is that Maharshi Valmiki had just gained the clarity from Narada right before this incident. So why does this disturbing moment arise directly after that?
That's a good question, Kanna. The point is that when you look at that incident focused, it appears to be a tragedy, it appears to be a sad event. But let's step back and look at that overarching grand design. In fact, this incident is what triggered the birth of the first shloka and provided a communication means to communicate the entire Ramayana. So this is, when you look at that grand design, it makes sense. And in fact, this triggered that larger goal and larger objective.
I think this very much ties back to the point where this is all a leela to set up for the story. And I think that connects very well for that part. So Vivek Ji, there's another fascinating aspect that very much stood out to me here. It was that this wasn't just a reaction, because the words come out with a lot of structure, rhythm, and like completeness. So how do we begin to understand this?
Yes, a fine analysis. And I was smiling to myself when you describing Rajeshi as Acha and him describing you as Kanna and you describing Vikranji as uncle. So I was like, wow, this is really lovely to have such a family feel in this podcast. He's not just Ratnakara or Valmiki or Valmiki Ji. I've been describing him as Rishi Valmiki. Others have been describing him as Maharishi Valmiki. In our earlier podcast, you described him as the Adi Kavi. This is to show the greatness of Rishi Valmiki Ji, that he's a seer. The way you describe Rishi in English is seer. He's one who can see all the moving parts. Or put more simply, he can see the future. And specifically, that people will become more distracted. There will be more stuff in the world. There'll be more relationships in the world. So people will become more distracted. And so a teaching methodology is to create a message in a rhythmic form, such as, if I were to ask you to tell me the ABCDs, how we learned this, Daksha, was A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Correct? There's a rhythm to it. No different than when I ask my kids about the month, they'll say these months have 30 days and this month has 31 days. There's a psychology to this message being offered. This psychology helps this message to be retained more. So Rishi Valmiki Ji, feeling this śloka, this sorrow, was not by accident. He's experiencing this oneness, so the suffering of a bird, even the suffering of a hunter. If a hunter is hunting, it's coming out of a place of smallness. This suffering Rishi Valmiki Ji is experiencing as well, but he's more concerned with the solution, the compassion. And so what comes from this śloka is a shloka. It is a message for one to grow out of dejection and anxiety and stress. But this message is packaged so beautifully, so powerfully. Even when we study the Veda, the first Veda was written in prose. It was like a report, like an executive summary. But then it started to change, correct? There was a Veda in poetry. There was a Veda in song. There was a Veda in summary. So this is why Rishi Valmiki Ji, who's a master teacher, a master psychologist, this didn't come out of him spontaneously, but rather very intentionally, with a high level of EQ and SQ.
I really appreciate the psychological aspect just because that's what I'm studying.
Right.
But it also makes complete sense for the general public, I guess, to understand it more so that way. So I think that was a very clear explanation on that part. So Vikrant uncle, in moments like this, emotions can be very strong and thus hard to deal with. So what does it take to feel our emotions fully while not losing any control?
Beautiful question, Daksha. When we get strong emotions, generally there are two options, general speaking. Either to express those emotions. If I'm feeling angry, if I express it, it will spoil the relationships. I'll be called aggressive. Or second, some people go for is they don't express, they suppress it. If I suppress those strong emotions, I'll spoil myself and I will go closer to depression. So if I express, I'll be called aggressive. If I suppress, it will lead to depression. What should be done then? Neither express nor suppress, address it. And how to address it is taught in Ramayana. Address it, go to a guru to address it. Read the scriptures to address it. Meditate to address it. When you address it, you get the control. You will not lose the control. And as they say, fully living means addressing it. In psychology, you are a student, you know reliving is reliving. You relive it with a better mindset, better understanding. And this is what Valmiki Ji also did. What he did is, he deliberately let the question sink.
Okay. This is something I feel very much aligns with modern psychology, like you said. And like I've said in the previous podcast as well, it is mind-blowing how accurate everything said back then was to our modern day knowledge. And it just bewilders me every time. So for Acha, this part really stayed with me. Valmiki Ji questions himself, asking why he said a curse, even when the act itself of killing the bird was wrong. So what is the significance of this?
Yeah, actually, that's the greatness of Maharshi Valmiki. Because what came out of him was not what he intended to speak. He never wanted to do a curse, but without his knowledge, something came out of him. That's what forced him to sit back and think and meditate. That is a great quality, like self-awareness. Something can happen, but the moment you know it, that makes a huge difference. That's exactly what happened. That is why he went into meditation. That is why he was able to talk to Brahmaji and understand all the context.
Okay, yeah, that makes complete sense. This kind of fits into everything else we discussed before, so that is a very good answer, I feel. And just before we end off our discussion for today, I have one final question for each of you. Is this moment really about the bird and the shloka, or something much bigger than that, would you say?
I think I'm supposed to start. I very much acknowledge and appreciate what Vikrant Ji shared about when an experience happens to sit with that in one's life rather than react. And Rajesh vocalized this in the form of engaging in self-reflection. Earlier today, I had a meeting about racism with a group of community leaders in the Niagara region. And I was sharing with them that the happier a high school student is, we were talking about high school students, the less racist they are. The happier they are, the less racist they are. The less happier they are, the more racist they are. And the implication of what I was sharing was for high school students and really all of us to engage in self-reflection. Self-reflection. So now, presently I'm teaching the Mahabharata, which is the other itihasa that we have difficulty touching because it's so big. And there's one scenario where there is a confusion about Devi Draupadi being married to the Pandavas. One Devi, 5 Devas. And Rishi Vyasa arrives at that scene and asks everyone of their opinions. Asks Drupada what he thinks, asks Drishtadyumna what he thinks. And finally, he shares his perspective. And he goes back into many generations and many dimensions sharing, this happened and this happened for this to happen. And so Rishi Vyasa, like Rishi Valmiki Ji, they're aware of all of the moving parts. They're aware of all of the factors and then operate from that narrative. So when we, again, zoom into there was a hunter and there were birds and then there was a hunting and that bird died, to us that's very dramatic and very localized. But for someone who knows all the moving parts, this is all custom designed to happen for that scene to move forward in evolution, but really all people's lives to move forward in evolution, including every one of us, our relationship together. So this is way, way, way beyond the jungle and a bird and a hunter and śloka and śloka. This is the divine who's reaching out to us in the form of the Ramayana and now this Ramayana podcast for us to feel what's inside of our hearts, that oneness I described earlier, that Rishi Valmiki Ji is living and feeling.
Excellent answers. And I'll conclude by saying that this is a sequence of events. Just look what happened that morning. Narada came and explained the entire life story of Rama to Valmiki Ji. And look at the second instant. It provided a new means of communication. Padabhatha Aksharasama Tantrilaya Samanyita. A communication means which can express emotions. A communication means which can be retained by generation after generation. And then in the next episode, in the next chapter, Brahmaji comes and connects all the dots. So this is such an important incident, much bigger than the bird or hunter or the curse.
Thank you so much, Vivek Ji, Vikrant Uncle, and Acha. What really stands out in this moment is how something as simple as a moment in nature can open the door to something so profound. And Maharshi Valmiki's response really reminds us that compassion, expression, and self-reflection are all very interconnected in how we express everything. It's not just about what we feel, but rather how we understand what we feel. So sometimes the most important step is to rather inquire within ourselves rather than reach forward. And if you're finding these reflections meaningful, please do subscribe to the Project Self YouTube channel and follow the Ramayana Odyssey podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. In the next episode, we'll see how this moment unfolds further and how divine guidance enters Valmiki's journey. Until then, thank you so much for listening.